it's not that you're giving them an answer on what email system to use or what laptop is better. They're trusting you to sit down, give them some guidance on how technology can accelerate their business growth. Keep thinking, keep learning, and also see how that learning can be deployed into the business. So I think big responsibility for a CIO or a fractional CIO is also that they're not just consulting or guiding on the current business strategy or how the business will grow. They're also bringing in and recommending newer things that they think a business could use.
Hi everyone, welcome to the second episode of Promantus Edge. I'm Snigdha, Marketing Associate at Promantus, and today we are discussing all things about a fractional CIO and how can it help grow your business. So to discuss this topic today, we have Mr. Ashwani Kaul, Vice President Information Systems at Promantus. He's been working in tech for the last 20 years and the last 6 years in a fractional capacity for various clients. He focuses on serving small and medium-sized businesses and early-stage startups. Mr. Ashwini, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Snigdha. Happy to be here.
So before we dive into the conversation, you tell us a bit about your background and your role at Promantus.
Sure. Thanks, Snigdha. So my name is Ashwani Kaul. I am the VP of Information Systems at Promantus. I've been working in tech, as you mentioned, a little over 20 years. If you include my intern work at college, I have a bachelor's degree in information technology from Delhi University. Then I moved to the US, did my master's in computer science over here. So out and out a very strong technology background, but personally, I always loved helping businesses and helping solve problems. And I see technology as a big way to do that. After I finished my master's here, I started working. I've worked as developer and systems architect for electronic health records. I've worked a lot in clinical technologies. I've worked in real estate and wellness. And since then, like being a part of Promantus, and because of how agile Promantus is, and also it's not a big enterprise, so you get to do a lot more than what your original role is. I think that kind of naturally gave me a segue to get into a more role where I picked up responsibilities of being a CIO, wherein managing information systems and putting strategies in place for the organization. And we started doing that for other clients of ours.
Right. You have been working as the CIO for different companies and startups. So, what do you like the most about being a CIO?
What I like the most about is that I think at the crux of it, it is problem solving, which I think any role is, any job is, specifically for executives. But I think CIO specifically is you're solving problems using technology. A lot of these companies, and I think I'll probably be going into like why a CIO or a fractional CIO is helpful, is a lot of these companies, they are starting their businesses or they are growing up, but they don't have technology at the core of their business. But even without technology being the core of their business or technology being the business that they sell or the commodity that they sell, they still need technology in place to run the business part of it. And I think that's where the CIO part comes in, is that you need technology to run operations, you need technology to run finance, to run accounting, to help legal, to set up your customer relationship systems, ticketing systems. How do you connect all of these pieces? So what makes me excited about it is that there is a lot of things to do and a lot of problems to solve. And it's a new and exciting challenge every day.
Right, that's right. Technology binds all of these functions together and helps you grow. So, even when I was researching for this podcast, I was looking up fractional CIO on Google Trends, and I noticed that in the past 1-2 years, it has been gaining traction. So, we want to know from the CIO himself, what is a fractional CIO, and how is it different from a traditional CIO?
So I wouldn't say traditional, I would say like a full-time CIO. A CIO in an organization would be somebody that's responsible for like the strategy development around technology for the organization, would be somebody who's responsible for adoption of new technology or new processes.
Right.
if you think of the word called digital transformation, a CIO would be at the helm of that. Uh, there'd be a component of budgeting and cost management. There will be a component of cybersecurity and data protection. There'll be components where a CIO might be helping in project management, vendor management, licensing and contract management is a pretty big thing, and setting up communication systems in general, and
Yeah.
maybe even looking over communication. So a lot of times, CIOs also sort of oversee the not just the communication systems, meaning email systems or other systems that we have in the organization, but also how do we manage and share data? How do we communicate what goes on those communication systems? So traditional CIO does a lot of this.
Yeah.
A traditional CIO ends up staffing a lot of people within their organization with either a senior vice president or a vice president role or director role. There'll be a lot of associates who do a bunch of things, and they essentially eventually specialize and fall within brackets of like whether it's operations, logistics, like somebody who's helping accounting or finance. Um, but a traditional CIO comes at a cost. You're
Yeah.
hiring a very senior, trained expert with a lot of industry experience to come in and do all of these things, and that makes sense for an organization once you've gone beyond a certain number of employees or a certain recurring revenue in business, when you've gotten to some scale. When you're
Yeah.
starting up or when you're a small business or a medium-sized business, that could be a cost that could literally anchor you down and slow you in your tracks. You don't need that much weight. Um, and at the same time, you don't need that much strategy or that much process either. So you could use some parts of it. So that's where a fractional CIO comes in, is that besides understanding information systems and technology and adoption, they also have this experience that they bring in where they can understand the business that they are coming to help. And once they understand the business, they can strategically deploy ideas and share with the business owners or the business operators on how and when and how much of processes and how much of technology to implement and introduce. And what are those processes and technologies to implement and introduce? You could start with using a very simple SaaS product, and maybe
Yeah.
even start with a free or a freemium account of SaaS product without paying for it. Eventually get into paid accounts, and maybe even think of getting or building something in-house down the line. But CIO will help the business owners and operators look at that roadmap, understand it, come to terms with when they need to make what measures and what's important for the business right now.
Okay. That's a very elaborate explanation. But to gain a better understanding about the fractional CIO services, uh, you have worked with companies, and can you tell us a bit about the project that you worked on and the process that you followed, the journey there?
Yeah, so I would say there are like always multiple projects going on. So
Yeah.
it's not just one, because you can imagine like when you are operating in a CIO role, it's not one project or one initiative. There are multiple things, and you're firing on all cylinders at the same time. So there are times where um, for the simplest of things, I am helping a client manage their email system and making sure that everything is secure and compliant, which is a part of the role where like you're supporting the information security or cybersecurity part of the organization. Um, at the same time, I am also consulting and helping the operations and the e-commerce team on best practices for how to set up their Shopify store and how to connect it to a drop shipping system, how to make sure, how to ensure that all of these stores and accounts are created using service accounts that can be transferable to other people and we're not tied to one person in an organization. Um, at the same time, I've been busy with helping the accounts and the financing system bring in a new ERP into the organization. So even though I don't come with a financial accounting background myself, I would work very closely with legal and accounts people and CPAs and finance folks to understand what they need, what the new system is bringing in. We might hire a third party consultant to implement the ERP system, but I would be the interface, the technology interface for that third party vendor coming into this client. helping them set up the right accounts, helping them ensure that the security is met, and making sure that folks on the client side of business understand that new technology is being adopted.
So you mentioned a lot of things like working with the legal team, working with the finance team, the marketing team. So it makes complete sense why a company would hire a fractional CIO. So just to clarify the terms CIO and CTO, what is the difference between the two terms?
Good question. And a lot of people sort of confuse and overlap that.
Yeah,
So a CTO is what they call a chief technology officer. So CTO is involved when an organization is building some technology as part of their core offering.
right.
So if you're a software company or a platform company or a hardware company that's building a product, CTO would be the person who would be making decisions on what frameworks to use, what deployment models to use, how do you get this done, what kind of engineers you hire to build this product. So the CTO would be sort of like the chief visionary on how do you make technical decisions on the product that a company is selling, which is core part of their business.
Right.
A CIO oversees all the ancillaries that make that business run. So things like project management, things like finance and accounting, things like legal, things like marketing, all of these divisions also need to use technology, need to adopt technology and embrace it, and also collaborate with each other. A CIO would oversee all of those information systems that the organization is using.
Okay.
So the CTO would probably be building a product that they would sell,
Yeah.
but the CIO would be providing the CTO the tools to use that product.
So uh, I would like to ask you what kind of challenges these companies are typically facing that a CIO can actually help, a fractional CIO.
Sure, sure. So when you look at a small to medium business, you're essentially thinking of some business that probably either is smaller in scale in terms of their headcount, in terms of their employee footprint, or smaller in revenue. There's some certain number of revenue amount that they are hitting right now, or they are a startup that have just come off ground in the last year or two. Most of the times, I won't say all, but most of the times, what happens is that these companies are, as they should, are focused on their core product or their core service offering. So essentially, the organizer, the operator, or the person who started the company um, has thought of an idea. They're trying to execute and build on it. Most of the times, they're very focused on building that product, building that service out very well. What happens is that while you're building those out, they may or may not think about data security around the product. They may or may not think about information security or what their vulnerability could be to cyber attacks. They may or may not be thinking about what compliance they need to adhere to given the industry they're getting into, right? Uh, Eventually, they would want to start thinking about like, how do we connect our main product, and how do, for us to monetize the main product, there needs to be an accounting system in place. There needs to be some processes where you can send out invoices or you can bill your customers, they can pay, and that can go into your accounting system. So those are the pieces that are very important to run a business, but they're not core part of the business. I think so. That's where the challenge for these small medium companies comes in, is that they are specialists or experts in the product that they want to build. They may or may not have the operational knowledge of how to run it or scale it as a business, or how to provide additional services around it, how to support that core product for it to scale.
Right. You mentioned about cybersecurity attacks that these companies could face because they're just starting out, and there was a study that said 66% of all cybersecurity attacks were on small and medium businesses. And people might think these cybersecurity attackers focus on the large businesses, but that's not the case here. So, could you throw some light on the cybersecurity challenge that these companies face?
Sure. And I think that statistic is very well written, because bigger organizations, even though attacking them could provide a lot more benefits to persons who are picking out those cybersecurity attacks. But what also happens is that bigger organizations have much bigger firewalls, they have much bigger moats, they have teams of people who are working to defend them. They probably have a role that's um, a specialized CIO role called CISO, or a Chief Information Security Officer, whose job day in and day out is just to make sure that the organization is protected. The reason why a bigger percentage of organizations that come under cybersecurity threats are smaller organizations or medium businesses is because they have their guards down. In most of the cases, these people, as I said, are focused on building the product. They either are not aware of the threats that could come from cybersecurity issues, or they are not capable of handling, or they don't have the bandwidth to handle and make the organization secure or compliant while they're also building their product up.
Right.
So it's very much like it's they're building their product and they're building their service, but all of their doors and their gates are open. They're very prone to cybersecurity attacks that could steal their intellectual property, that could steal their product idea, or in fact even um, put some ransomware on their systems and like pull money away from them.
Okay. So now I want to move on to the next benefit of hiring a fractional CIO, and the most important one for small businesses. That is, it is cost effective as compared to hiring a full-time CIO. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Since you mentioned, like, when you say small medium businesses, uh, all of the business functions that a CIO helps in, a small or a medium business might not have the need or the requirement to deploy or use those functions at the get-go. Which means that at the beginning of the business, a fractional CIO might just come in for maybe a few hours a month, just guide the founders or the operators on what strategies to deploy, what technologies to use, and how to use them. Eventually, the CIO might even come in and help these founders or these business operators hire some engineers or hire some associates who can operate those systems. But then the CIO can continue to be fractional, which means that they could hire a person to do certain technology work or manage some information systems, and the business could justify the cost of hiring a person who's executing on those systems, but the person managing that execution or giving strategy might still be fractional. Um, that in and of itself gives these businesses a lot of strategic advantage in terms like they can save a lot of money, they can be a lot more optimized on their resource deployment, and they can focus on what really is needed for the business at that point in time. So as I mentioned earlier, an organization doesn't, I believe, doesn't need a full-time CIO until you hit a certain amount of scale or a revenue where you need in-house executive leadership and team underneath them to manage information systems 24 by 7. Until such time, you can always use and take advantage of a fractional CIO who can strategize, who can tell you when to deploy which technology or what process to bring in. And they could also guide the organization on how to staff that process, whether you bring um, somebody part-time for a few hours a week to run a system, or eventually helping the organization hire a more junior level role to manage those systems, but the fractional CIO himself or herself stays part-time for the business just to optimize the cost.
Yeah. With that cost effective solution, you also get the flexibility to work around different times and uh, just get the help when it is needed rather than having a full time CIO.
Correct, correct. Which is the part of the model is that it is a service, and it is essentially a model wherein you reach out for help or somebody seeks help when they need it, or when they have an initiative or project that they want to take over. So you don't have to be tied to the business all working hours of a week. You only step in when you're needed, or only step in when there's an initiative that you are being asked to take over. And it makes it easier for the company founders or the owners as well to pull in for help when they need it.
Correct. So the amount of work, the amount of hours that you give to these companies depends on project to project.
Depends on project to project, depends on the kind of engagement you're getting into with these companies, depends on the kind of retainer models that you want to get into these with these companies, or what these companies want to spend on. Um, there could be organizations that are just starting up, and something that um, I would just do for free is spend maybe an hour or so in a month just to guide somebody to get started. If somebody is looking for some technology help or some guidance on what systems to use for their new business, that's something we do quite a bit and we do quite a lot of. We do it for a lot of our friends. We do it for anybody who's seeking for some help. It's something we do, uh, one, out of goodwill, two, of course, to build our network up, and just for the love of technology and get people going. So it could be as simple as um, one meeting before somebody starts a business, to eventually they bring me or somebody else similar to my position on a retainer for a few hours a month, wherein they are looking for they they either are looking for some specific help on certain initiatives and projects, to help research some ideas, to talk through some compliance or some legal guidelines, or there are times where they don't even know what they're looking for. They just need another seasoned executive sitting by their side, thinking through, understanding what the business is, and giving them some guidelines and roadmaps on where they could take the business or where technology could support the business and help them grow. To the other side of the thing is that you could be as engaged as spending maybe half your working time with a particular client, because they could be at a point where, like, they've started to staff up quite a bit. They have hired folks in their marketing division, they've hired folks in their operations division. All of these people do need some senior leadership to guide them and also keep them. So you
Yeah.
could be spending a lot more time with such an organization. And the goal there is that you're spending that time with the organization, but also sort of coaching and helping the organization to get ready to eventually have systems and processes in place and have the right lookout for starting to scout for a CIO of their own. Because they eventually would get to a point where using a fractional CIO for more than X number of hours in a week is going to become more expensive, because
Yeah.
being fractional comes at a cost. Like, the per hour cost is higher because you're bringing in so much expertise in a very small time frame. So they eventually would want to see somebody who's uh, coming in full time, not just to save cost, but also somebody who can then spend all of their thinking hours, waking hours on the business, helping the business grow. And that's the point where, as a fractional CIO, I would want to sit and consult with the CEO, the other people in the C-suite, to see what should they be looking for in a CIO, and even help them interview and hire and recruit a CIO, for us to eventually step away from that role.
Okay. I think you added the last point that was very interesting. So, since you work with different companies, you are fractional CIO to different companies. How do you ensure that you create a space where there is a collaborative environment and you gel in with their culture, with how they work properly? So, how do you make that happen?
Good point, and I think that goes back to, like, I think a important piece in being a fractional executive, and whether it's a CMO or a CIO, is that I think you need to understand people very well. I think talking to people, getting that communication up, knowing what the business is, knowing how the people operate and function is the most important part. Because, like, you have to keep in mind that
Yeah.
it's not that you're giving them an answer on what email system to use or what laptop is better. It's they're trusting you to sit down and give them some guidance on how technology can accelerate their business growth, or
Right.
where they could deploy technology to grow business. So they're putting their trust in you, and you have to understand, like, so you have to spend time building that uh, connection with the clients, building that rapport with those folks on like how do we collaborate, how do we work, and you have to be flexible yourselves because not every organization would have the same way to work. Not every organization would have the same email system to work. So you have to be flexible. You have to be able to context switch fairly quickly, and you have to be comfortable being in. I hate to say the word firefighting, but you have to be comfortable with the fact that there are going to be uh, you're doing a lot of conflict resolution. You're solving problems day in and day out, and that's what people are hiring you for.
Correct, correct. I think, from my understanding, the biggest strength that a scaling company could have is technology, and it is developing at such a rapid pace. So, how can a fractional CIO come in and help the company stay ahead of the curve and make better strategic decisions?
That's an interesting question, and especially considering how we have seen AI come up so
Yeah.
fast and so quick in the last year or so. Um, so I think big responsibility for a CIO, for a fractional CIO, is also that they're not just consulting or guiding on the current business strategy or how the business will grow, but they're also bringing in and recommending newer things that they think a business could use, which means that from a job perspective, a CIO is always learning and always looking at new systems, always adopting
Mhm.
and adapting to what the new technology trends are. Uh, Keeping your eyes and ears open, learning fast on whatever minimal knowledge is available, but then more importantly, being able to apply that learning and provide some actionable guidance to your clients is the key.
Yeah, I think
Whatever
also.
new, correct, whatever new emerging technology is coming up, just a small blurb or a hint of like how the business could use a new technology to grow, to scale, to accelerate their product development, to accelerate their customer outreach, to improve their customer experience, any of those things. I think a CIO has to keep thinking, keep learning, and also see how that learning can be deployed into the business.
So, moving on, I'd like to ask you, is there a specific company size that could benefit most from these fractional CIO services? Or, like, who are your ideal clients?
Yeah, so my ideal, I think that's a very good question. So I think a company size, anything from I would say 2 to 3% organization. I won't say 1% because 1% in and of itself is like I think they're thinking quite a bit. They might need some consulting, but like so I would say anything from a 2 to 3 people organization to a 200 people organization could use a fractional CIO.
Okay.
Uh, what would happen is that the amount of engagement and the time of engagement would increase as you increase with the number of people.
Mhm.
And as you go, I would say beyond 75 to an 80 headcount is when the fractional CIO would start to recommend hiring some internal folks in the company to start running the day-to-day processes. So they still might be guiding them, but essentially, because what then the fractional CIO is doing is they're helping the company understand why an office of information systems is needed in the company, and they will help them to start staffing it up to a point where the company is then ready to hire their own CIO.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's very important. So, to understand this better and to know the CIO services that you provide as part of Promantus, suppose I have a startup and we are trying to scale it. So, what are the first steps that you would take to support a client like me?
So I think the first steps, of course, first steps I would take is I would definitely want to like get introduced to you, understand the business, understand what your core offering is. Are you building a product? Are you building a service? How are you building it? How are you taking that service to market? What is your customer base? Understanding those pieces, and then also trying to understand what kind of staffing would you need as a business in order to service that core product and offering. Once we get that part is when we start to think about like, all right, I'm sure you already have set up an email account. I'm sure you have a calendaring system. The moment you get to more than two or three people, do you have a collaboration platform in place? Like, do you have some place where you can collaborate and actively chat with each other through the day, share your files? Eventually getting into like, what is your strategy? How do you market? Is there a marketing platform involved? Once you get into documentation, getting legal documentation in place, where do you store those? How do you sign them? How do you get those pieces? So I think to start with, it goes from like what the business is, uh, how are you growing it, what is the core product and service offering, how do you get it to market, and then also getting to some level of understanding of like how technical or non-technical are the founders and the operators of the business, and if they have a technical or technology background, are they wanting to play in the CIO space, or are they more focused on being the CTO or the chief product officer for the company?
Right.
If they have played the CIO space before, then it's more of a like redundancy to be there for us. We would rather just advise them on that they can go on their own, and we can help them staff up, and we can help them with certain services and products at that point in time, or we can help them with certain team members who can help them execute on certain applications at that point in time. But uh, a good understanding of how much technical background does a founder and owner have, and if there is a lack of that, how do you replace that and fill it up from a fractional CIO perspective in order to support the business and grow it.
Okay. So since we are talking about the services that you provide, so here's a quick follow-up that I want to ask you. What sets Promantus apart? What sets your services apart as a fractional CIO?
I think most importantly, I would say it's because Promantus itself comes from a consulting background,
Yeah.
which meant that we've been in multiple businesses through the life of the company. We've been with multiple clients, we've worked with multiple businesses. What that's done with us is that given the deep technology background that we already had, we got exposed to a lot of different kinds of businesses, a lot of different kinds of business challenges. And we developed a very keen sense of understanding of like what's missing in a certain business and what is a challenge that we can come in and address. So that's one piece that sets us apart. The other piece is that uh, we do have a strong technology team in-house. So what that does is that a lot of times people, when they come in and talk about a fractional executive, it's usually somebody who's only providing a plan or a guidance. But then when it comes to executing on that plan, you need to go and hire another vendor or hire some people to do that from the get-go, which eventually would make sense. But when you're starting up, it basically adds to more friction. It slows things down. Promantus itself, we have a deep technology uh, bench, which means that when we come up with these plans, you don't just get a fractional CIO. There is an entire team backing the
Yeah.
CIO to come in and execute with you and help you build all of those systems up.
Correct. So uh, we got a lot of in-depth information about who a CIO is and what does he do, how can he help you grow your business strategically, and yeah, you explained it in a way that a layman could also understand. So that was very helpful. Coming to the end of it, so where can people find you, and businesses who are looking to get in touch with you, how can they contact you?
Can reach out to me at ashwani@promantusinc.com. That's my email address. You can look me up on LinkedIn. We'll probably put the links to my LinkedIn account on the post as well, or link it up. Yeah, you can reach out to promantusinc.com, our website, and there are forms that you can fill up. People can reach out to me or just put in a general business inquiry to reach us.
Thank you so much for taking out the time today and doing this conversation with us. We hope the audience got some valuable insights into the world of fractional and fractional CIOs and how it's going to evolve in the future. So for more Promantus content and resources, you can visit our website. That's www.promantusinc.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more such informative content. We'll be back with yet another episode. Stay tuned until then. Thank you so much.